Hey folks, we've got some exciting news. Patch 3.16 introduces new atmospheric bounty hunting content. Until now, you could only do NPC bounty hunting missions in Crusader and Hurston space, and they only spawned in asteroid and debris fields surrounding the moons. Patch 3.16 changes that, and it adds NPC bounty hunting missions to every moon in the system, and even some of the planets. I'm going to share what I've learned in the latest PTU patch, and I'll post any changes in the pinned comment below. In the existing bounty hunting spaces of Crusader and Hurston, missions will randomly pick whether to spawn in space or in the atmosphere of the planets or moons. You can tell what type of mission it is by reading the description of the contract. For the new bounty hunting areas of ArcCorp and Microtech, the bounties are always in atmosphere. The ArcCorp Blackjack bounties tell you the difficulty by telling you the crime stat level of the enemy, and the Microtech bounties don't tell you anything, but you can figure it out by the payouts. One catch about the atmospheric bounties is that sometimes you'll get a bounty that spawns and there are no quantum markers near the position. You can quantum to a marker close by and fly the rest of the way at max speed skimming across the top of the atmosphere, or you can abandon it and try your luck with the next bounty. The silver lining is that the times that I did fly a few hundred kilometers to the bounty, it spawned right away from me, probably because I was holding onto the quest for so long while I was flying there. This happened to me in Microtech, Hurston, and ArcCorp space, so I think it happens in all of them. You level up in difficulty the same way as before, so the Bounty Hunters Guild reputation is still the one that unlocks higher levels of difficulty for the bounties, and those higher levels apply to both the atmospheric bounties and the in-space bounties. So assuming we don't get a reputation wipe going into 3.16, you can pick up at VHRTs if that's what you were doing before. There's also a couple of new reputations for the new areas. We've got the existing ones for Crusader and Hurston, and the new security forces are Blackjack for ArcCorp and MT Protection Services for Microtech. And just like before, reputation with the specific security forces increase your bounty mission payouts in that space. For the combat itself, one thing to note is that the names of the NPC and the quest objective name aren't matching up right now. I'm not sure if it'll be fixed, but it's something to be aware of. Like in 3.15, you should wait until the quest marker updates to the bounty before killing them so that you get credit. I did 6 or 7 bounties where I didn't wait, and I never got credit by waiting around later, so that means it's time to start practicing your skills dodging fire and atmosphere. And as you'd expect, certain ships will do better than others, since now agility matters a lot more. In atmosphere, it's really difficult to evade incoming damage and maneuver yourself into a good firing position in larger ships, whereas they were pretty manageable in space because there was no air resistance pushing you around. And since you can't really pick to avoid atmospheric bounties, this shakes things up since you'll ideally want a ship that can be decent at both. Because of this, I've started to love heavy fighters a bit less and prefer the agile light and medium fighters even more. There's also a few other factors to consider, like the fact that all atmosphere isn't the same. Planets tend to have a denser atmosphere than moons, which fly much more like you're in space. Atmospheric flight is also pretty fuel intensive, so fuel efficient ships will be able to go longer before having to refuel compared to ships that were borderline before. One more thing that I wanted to point out is that when you're around planets and moons, a lot of the time you'll be in the dark, and it's really difficult to keep track of where the ground is. The scan ping can be really useful here as it quickly highlights anything that you can collide with, so you can basically pretend that you're Daredevil and figure out where you're going by sonar. You can see me pinging it during darkside combat to get my bearings, and it's really helpful. The nice thing about atmospheric bounty combat is that there aren't any asteroids that you might accidentally ram into while strafing, but you do have to be cognizant of one more constant factor, which is your altitude and the direction that the ground is in to make sure you don't accidentally ram into that instead. Here I'm doing my MRT certification mission on Hurston in a Freelancer miss. I'm chasing a Buccaneer closer and closer to the surface while some Gladiuses are buzzing around me and chipping away at my shields. The Buccaneer actually just crashes into the ground, so I decide to turn around and take out the Gladiuses. But this is where I learned just how serious of an impact planetary atmosphere will have on larger, less agile fighters in combat. I'm really struggling to bring my nose around, and I'm even applying boost while also rolling to use my pitch axis to try and help myself out. But I'm still turning very slowly, and I'm getting dangerously close to the ground as well. I finally get sight of the Gladiuses, and I'm able to bring my gimbaled cannons to bear on one of them. But during all of this, my shields have gotten dangerously low because I'm so slow in atmosphere I may as well be a sitting duck for these agile fighters. So now I'm having to do power management to try and triage the situation. I end up locking up the second one, and I eventually take him out as well, but it takes a long time. Now if we take a look at combat on a moon, we'll be able to see how much more maneuverable even a heavy fighter can be. The Ares is a pretty maneuverable fighter to boot, but I still think we can make the point here. And since we're fighting some small ships, we can also take a look at some of the balance changes the devs are thinking about for the Ion. It now fires about 3 times faster, it has more weapon spread, and it got a 10% DPS increase. Some folks think that this makes it better at killing light fighters, but I actually think that these changes make it much worse. Which is fine though, since the ship was intended to take out large ships. You can see in this fight I'll have my targets lined up a bunch of times, but the shots just don't land. I still think that leaves this ship in a strong place for bounty hunting though, but with the additional hydrogen consumption in Atmosphere, we'll have to see if it isn't just straight up outshined by more agile and fuel efficient ships. This Eclipse actually took me another 45 seconds to kill due to a combination of its small forward-facing profile, its large destructible wings, and its good agility in Atmosphere. So I'm skipping ahead here to the footage of the Mustang Delta so we can see how shots land on another typical small target. We're much better lined up for this target and they have a bigger profile, so even though the weapon spread is still making some shots miss, we get them before too long. Now if we compare that to a much more agile ship using laser cannons that don't have weapon spread, we'll see how much more effectively we're able to handle an Eclipse. And I even make a mistake in the Banu Defender here by not having my capacitor set to weapons, but it doesn't end up mattering. We're able to control the range and get in their face and land our shots accurately and take them out much more quickly. I also wanted to see how the Vanguard Sentinel, aka the king of bounty hunting, fared in Atmosphere, and it actually did better than I expected. I was able to turn without having to constantly boost, and the hydrogen fuel consumption was a bit high, but not terrible. Here I'm fighting a Buccaneer in the clouds over Microtech, and I don't even have a good loadout. My size 2 cannons are all distortion cannons in the PTU because of a bug preventing me from getting into Cousin Crows to get the MVSA laser cannons that I'd prefer, so I'm relying on only the size 5 laser cannon for hull damage. By gapping some distance from the light fighters and turning around, I give myself an opportunity to snipe him as he approaches me, and as he closes the distance and flies past me, I rotate to track him and am able to land some shots to take him out. Next up is the Anvil Hornet, which will be a bit easier since it's a larger, less agile target. It isn't too hard to track him as he flies around me, and so I land a bunch of body shots to get the first explosion. Hornets sometimes have their cockpit left over after you blow them up once, so I give him an encore performance and send him on his way. The last bit of combat that I'll show is of the Arrow, which might just be one of the best atmospheric bounty hunting ships. It's very maneuverable and precise in Atmosphere, and it's also really fuel efficient. What remains to be seen is whether or not it'll be able to avoid incoming fire from multiple VHRT class targets simultaneously, but against MRTs and lower it doesn't have any problems at all. Here we're fighting against an Aegis Gladius, which is another agile ship, and we have no problem keeping it in our sights. Alright folks, that's it for this video. I spent a lot of time figuring this stuff out, but it's still PTU so it could change, so I'll note any changes in the pinned comment below. Thanks for watching, and I hope you liked this video. Cheers!